There is a moment in every life when remaining the same becomes more painful than changing. It does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself. It settles quietly in your chest, as a weight you can no longer ignore. You wake up one day and realize that the version of yourself you've been protecting is now the very thing holding you back. You feel it in your exhaustion, in your lack of direction, in the quiet frustration that follows you even on good days. You know something is wrong, even if you cannot yet explain it. You have outgrown who you used to be, but the idea of letting that version die feels terrifying, because even a broken identity feels safer than the unknown. Every person carries outdated versions of themselves, habits that once protected them but now limit them, beliefs formed in survival that no longer fit a life of purpose, emotional wounds that were never healed, only hidden. We cling to these versions not because they serve us, but because they are familiar, and familiarity feels like safety. But the truth is unforgiving. You cannot rebuild your life while defending the very identity that keeps you trapped. You cannot move forward while dragging the weight of who you were meant to outgrow. Stoic philosophy teaches that real transformation does not begin in noise, validation, or constant connection. It begins in separation, in quiet, in moments where there is no audience, no distraction, and no escape from yourself. When you step away from the world's constant stimulation, something uncomfortable happens. You begin to hear yourself clearly, not the version shaped by expectations, but the one that has been whispering beneath the surface for years. The voice that knows you were meant for more. The voice that understands something must end before something stronger can begin. In silence, illusions collapse. You stop performing. You stop pretending. And for the first time, you face the truth of who you are and who you have become. Most people avoid this space because it forces confrontation. When distractions disappear, so do excuses. There's no one to blame, no one to impress, no noise to drown out regret, dissatisfaction, or unrealized potential. This is why solitude is feared. It reveals what has been avoided. But the Stoics saw this differently. They viewed solitude as a forge, a place where the mind is refined through honesty, a mirror that reflects reality without distortion. When you are alone, patterns become obvious. You see how often you choose comfort over responsibility, how frequently you delay the difficult conversation, the disciplined action, the necessary change. You begin to recognize emotional triggers you've never learned to master. You notice the ways you sabotage yourself through distraction, avoidance, or justification. Solitude exposes not just what is broken, but what is outdated. It reveals the identity you have been dragging into a future it no longer belongs in. This clarity is painful, but pain is not an enemy. Pain is information. It tells you what must change, what must be healed, and what must be released. Without this awareness, growth is impossible. You cannot correct what you refuse to acknowledge. In that quiet examination, something shifts. You stop lying to yourself. And once honesty arrives, tolerance for mediocrity disappears. You can no longer unknow what you now see. And from that moment forward, staying the same becomes unbearable. This is where transformation truly begins. But awareness alone is not enough. Once you see the truth, you must act on it. And action begins with removal. Nothing new can grow on top of behaviors that are actively destroying you. Yet most people attempt change by adding instead of subtracting. They stack new routines, new goals, new affirmations on top of the same habits that keep sabotaging their progress. Stoicism teaches that creation must follow destruction. Before you build a stronger life, you must dismantle what weakens it. Your patterns are not random. They're expressions of identity. The way you react under stress, the excuses you repeat, the distractions you reach for, the boundaries you fail to enforce. These are not surface-level habits. They are extensions of an older self that once helped you survive, but now prevents you from thriving. As long as these patterns remain, the old version of you stays alive. And that version is the reason you feel stuck, drained, and unfulfilled. Most people fail to change because they attempt compromise. They negotiate with habits that require elimination. They promise to cut back, ease up, or try again later. But there is no negotiation with self-sabotage. Partial commitment produces partial results, and partial results reinforce hopelessness. The Stoics believed in decisive clarity. Remove what no longer serves. Not gradually, not emotionally, but intentionally. Familiarity is powerful. Even painful routines feel safe because they are known. The mind prefers predictable suffering over uncertain growth. That is why people cling to patterns that harm them. They protect the ego from discomfort. But growth begins the moment discomfort becomes preferable to repetition. If the life you want requires different behaviors, then the version of you that resists change cannot survive the transition. There is no rebuilding without loss. There is no elevation without release. Letting go of old patterns feels like death because in a way it is. It is the death of reflexes, identities, and comforts you once relied on. But this death is not a tragedy. It is liberation. Once the old structure collapses, space appears. Mental space, emotional space, energetic space. And into that space, something stronger can emerge. But emergence requires pressure. The new version of you is not formed in ease. It is shaped by resistance. Comfort creates stability, but also creates stagnation. The self that remains comfortable remains unchanged. Discomfort is not punishment. It is the birthplace of growth. The identity you are leaving behind was built in comfort. That is why it cannot carry you forward. Comfort taught avoidance. It taught you to choose what feels easy instead of what builds strength. It taught you to protect your ego rather than expand your capacity. Discomfort does the opposite. It forces confrontation. It exposes limitations. It stretches your tolerance for effort, uncertainty, and responsibility. The Stoics deliberately practiced hardship, not out of self-denial, but out of preparation. They trained their minds to remain steady under pressure so that difficulty would no longer control them. They understood that avoidance creates fragility, while voluntary struggle creates resilience. Every uncomfortable action you take rewires your identity. Each time you do what you would rather avoid, you weaken the grip of the old self and strengthen the foundations of the new one. Discipline is born here, not from inspiration, but from repetition under resistance. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes with emotion. Discipline remains when emotion fades. If you wait to feel ready, you will remain stuck. If you wait for confidence, it will never arrive. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It is a result of it. Discipline is the decision to act regardless of mood. It is the agreement you make with your future self and honor daily. It is choosing long-term identity over short-term comfort. The Stoics did not build their lives on how they felt. They built them on what needed to be done. Writing, training, reflecting, acting with intention. Not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Consistency creates identity. Identity creates momentum. Momentum creates transformation. As discipline compounds, effort becomes character. What once required force becomes natural. You stop negotiating with yourself and start acting from principle. But even discipline struggles in the wrong environment. You cannot become a different person while remaining in the conditions that shaped the old one. Your surroundings influence you more than your intentions. The people you speak to, the content you consume, the spaces you occupy, and the routines you follow all shape your behavior quietly, persistently. If your environment is chaotic, distraction will feel inevitable. If it is stagnant, growth will feel unnatural. The Stoics understood that the mind reflects its surroundings. To rebuild yourself, you must protect what surrounds you. This means boundaries, with people, with information, with habits that pull you backward. Some spaces are incompatible with who you are becoming, not because they are wrong, but because they belong to a past version of you. Distance is sometimes required, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. As you change, relationships change. This is unavoidable. Some people will no longer recognize you. Others will resist your growth because it disrupts their comfort. Outgrowing people is painful because it challenges the idea that loyalty means remaining the same. But loyalty to stagnation is betrayal of self. You do not owe your evolution an apology. You are not obligated to remain accessible, agreeable, or familiar. Some people were meant to walk with you only until you learned what you needed from that chapter. Releasing them is not cruelty. It is clarity. Those who belong in your future will respect your boundaries and grow alongside you. Those who do not will cling to the version of you that made them comfortable. Let them. Change is the point. Distance is the point. Growth is the point. And this process does not happen once. Transformation is not an event. It is a practice. The old self does not disappear overnight. It fades as you stop feeding it. Every disciplined choice weakens it. Every intentional action strengthens the new identity. Rebirth happens daily, in ordinary moments, when no one is watching. It happens when you choose effort over ease, integrity over approval, focus over distraction, courage over avoidance. There is no perfect moment to change. There is only now. The Stoics lived with urgency, not panic. They understood time is finite and delay is costly. Each day is a vote for who you are becoming. And once you choose the higher path often enough, it becomes who you are. The old you had to break for the new you to rise. This breaking was not failure. It was preparation. You are not starting over. You are starting with awareness, strength, and intention. The person you are becoming is already forming through your choices. Continue, even imperfectly, especially when it's difficult. That is how real transformation happens.